For almost a year, I believed I was in love. Long-distance relationships require faith. They require patience. They require you to trust someone you can't see every day. And I trusted Tim. Or at least I thought I did. Then one morning, without warning, he vanished. No argument. No explanation. No goodbye. I woke up blocked on everything: calls, texts, social media. It was as if I had imagined the entire relationship. I spent days replaying our last conversation in my head, searching for a clue, a crack, a warning sign I might have missed. There was nothing. A month passed in silence. I started convincing myself that maybe this was closure. Maybe his disappearance was the universe doing me a favor. Then my phone lit up. His name. My heart betrayed me before my brain could react. The message was long, apologetic, emotional. He said he had panicked, said he was overwhelmed, said he realized he couldn't lose me. He begged for another chance. He promised he'd make it up to me. And then he did something dramatic. He sent me a plane ticket. A non-refundable ticket to visit him. Looking back, that should have been my second red flag, the first being the ghosting. But at the time it felt romantic. Grand. Like something out of a movie where the guy makes a mistake and fights to win the girl back. I wanted to believe that version of the story. So I packed my suitcase. When he picked me up at the airport, he looked exactly the same. Same smile, same cologne, same way of holding eye contact, just a second too long. For a moment I felt relief flood through me. Maybe we were going to fix this. On the drive to his house, he reached for my hand. "Do you want to try again?" he asked. It was impulsive, emotional. I hadn't processed anything. But sitting there beside him, thousands of miles from home, I said yes. I said yes before I even understood the cost. His house was large, older, slightly intimidating. When we walked in, his entire family was there. Parents, 2 brothers, and his younger sister. Felt formal. Like I was being evaluated. Smiled. Introduced myself. Tried to ignore the strange tension in the air. That night, my phone buzzed with a severe weather alert. A hurricane warning. I laughed nervously and showed Tim. He shrugged it off like it was nothing serious. "It'll pass," he said. But it didn't just pass. By morning, the sky was dark and violent. Wind slammed against the windows. Rain came down sideways. The house groaned under the pressure of the storm. Then Tim shook me awake. "Come downstairs," he said. His voice was flat. When I reached the living room, his entire family was seated in a row. On the coffee table sat a thick binder. I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. One by one, they began reading from it. Pages detailing reasons why I was unsuitable. Why the relationship wouldn't work. Why I wasn't right for their family. It was rehearsed, organized, prepared. This wasn't spontaneous. This was planned. When they finished, Tim stood up and said calmly, "We can't be together." I couldn't even process the humiliation before he added something worse. Because of the hurricane, it wasn't safe for me to leave. So I would be staying. But since I was no longer part of the family, I wouldn't be given access to family essentials. Food, water, bed. Those were reserved for them. The hurricane was expected to last 4 days. 4 days. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh. To admit this was twisted humor. He didn't. Outside, the storm roared like something alive. Inside, I realized something far more terrifying. I was trapped in a house full of people who had just stripped me of dignity. And now they were stripping me of basic survival. And that was only the beginning. Because the first night without food was hard. But the second day would be worse. And by the third day, I would realize just how far they were willing to go. And I still had no idea how I was going to survive 4 days inside that house. That first night felt unreal, like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. The hurricane howled outside with a violence I had never experienced before. Wind slammed into the house so hard the walls seemed to tremble. Rain lashed against the windows in chaotic bursts, and every so often, a deafening crack of thunder made me flinch. But the storm outside wasn't the worst part. The worst part was inside. After the humiliating family meeting, they simply went about their evening as if nothing had happened. Tim avoided eye contact. His parents retreated to the kitchen. His brothers laughed at something on television. No one looked at me. No one acknowledged that I was standing there, shocked, embarrassed, and suddenly disposable. When bedtime came, they disappeared upstairs one by one. I remained in the living room, unsure what I was supposed to do. There was no pillow, no blanket, no mattress, just hardwood floor. I sat down slowly, trying to preserve what little dignity I had left. I used my jacket as a pillow and curled onto my side, pulling my knees toward my chest. The floor was cold, colder than I expected, and within minutes I could feel the chill sinking into my bones. I hadn't eaten since the previous evening. At first, my stomach only growled softly. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself I could handle one missed meal. But as the hours passed, the hunger became sharp and twisting, like a fist tightening inside me. The smell of food from earlier still lingered faintly in the air. It felt deliberate. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The refrigerator humming, footsteps upstairs, toilet flushing, laughter behind closed doors. They were comfortable. I was not. I tried to make sense of it. How does someone go from saying they love you to orchestrating a public breakup and withholding food in the same breath? The answer slowly settled into my chest like a stone. This wasn't impulsive. This was planned. The binder. The hurricane timing. The sudden invitation. The ticket. He hadn't flown me there to reconcile. He had flown me there to humiliate me. Sometime after midnight, exhaustion dragged at my eyelids, but sleep wouldn't fully come. Every crash of wind jolted me awake. At one point, a powerful gust slammed into the house so hard I genuinely thought a window had shattered. My heart pounded as I sat upright, disoriented, breathing fast. For a split second I forgot where I was. Then reality rushed back. I wasn't home. I wasn't safe. And I wasn't welcome. By morning my back ached so badly I struggled to sit up. My mouth felt dry and sticky. I could hear dishes clinking in the kitchen. The smell of breakfast drifted toward me. Eggs, toast, something warm and real. I stood up slowly and walked toward the hallway. Tim was leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone. His mother poured coffee. His brothers joked about storm damage outside. No one offered me anything. I swallowed my pride and stepped closer to Tim. "I haven't eaten," I said quietly. My voice sounded smaller than I intended. "Can I just have something small? Anything?" He didn't look at me. "I told you," he replied flatly. "You're not part of this household anymore." The words hit harder than the hunger. "I'm starving," I whispered. "I feel weak." He finally looked up. For half a second, just half, I thought I saw hesitation. Maybe even guilt. Then it vanished. "We need our supplies," he said. "It's a hurricane. You'll have to figure something out." Figure something out. As if survival was now a puzzle I had to solve alone. I stepped back, heat rising behind my eyes. I refused to cry in front of them. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I returned to the living room and sat on the floor again, my stomach cramping violently now. The humiliation burned hotter than the hunger. But hunger is powerful. And by late afternoon, something inside me shifted. Fear was still there. But desperation was stronger. Because that night, when the house finally went quiet and the storm masked every small sound, I made a decision. If they were going to treat me like an outsider, then I would survive like one. And what I did next would change everything. Hunger changes you. It strips away pride. Quiets fear. It makes survival louder than shame. By the second night, I wasn't thinking about dignity anymore. I wasn't thinking about the humiliation, the binder, or even the breakup. I was thinking about food. The house had gone silent. The hurricane still raged outside, but its sound had become a strange kind of cover. Wind shrieking through trees, rain slapping against siding, distant crashes echoing through the dark. Upstairs I could hear faint footsteps. Door closing. Television turning off. Then nothing. I waited another 30 minutes, counting slowly in my head to be sure. My heart was beating so loudly I was convinced it could be heard from the second floor. I stood up from the hardwood, my legs slightly unsteady from lack of food, and began walking toward the kitchen. Each step felt like walking across thin ice. The hallway creaked under my weight. I froze after every small sound, holding my breath, listening for movement upstairs. But the storm masked most of it. When I finally reached the kitchen, I paused at the doorway. The pantry was right there. So close. I told myself I would take only what I absolutely needed. Something small. Something they wouldn't immediately notice. My fingers trembled as I opened the pantry door. Rows of canned goods. Boxes of pasta. Crackers. Bottled water stacked neatly in plastic wrapping. They weren't running out of food. They were making a point. The realization burned. I grabbed 2 cans at random, baked beans and chicken soup, and a small bottle of water. I spotted a can opener in a drawer and slipped that into my hand too. The metallic clink of the cans touching made my stomach drop. Too loud. Everything felt too loud. As I turned to leave, the floorboard near the doorway groaned sharply under my foot. Froze completely. Seconds stretched. I waited for a light to flick on upstairs. For footsteps. For a voice calling out. Nothing. Slowly, carefully, I made my way back to the living room. I didn't turn on a light. I didn't dare. Sitting cross-legged on the floor in near darkness, I opened the can as quietly as I could. Even the soft pop of the lid felt explosive in the silence. Ate fast. Too fast. The beans were cold and metallic tasting. The soup was thick and unheated. But in that moment, it was the most important meal of my life. I didn't savor it. I devoured it. The water felt like relief pouring into my veins. But survival came with consequences. When I finished, I stared at the empty cans. Evidence. If they found them, things would escalate. Without thinking too long about it, I crept toward the back door. The storm had softened to heavy rain, but wind still whipped through the yard. I slipped outside barefoot, the cold mud soaking into my feet instantly. The rain hit my face as I crouched near the bushes along the side of the house. I buried the cans under wet leaves and dirt, pushing mud over them with shaking hands. It felt ridiculous. A grown woman hiding empty soup cans like contraband. When I returned inside, soaked and shivering, I lay back on the hardwood floor. For the first time since arriving, my stomach wasn't clawing at me. But relief didn't last long. The next morning, as I tried to act normal, invisible, quiet, I made a mistake. Tim's younger sister caught me in the kitchen. She didn't say anything at first. She just looked at me, not angry, not shocked, just aware. My cheeks burned with humiliation. Later that afternoon, when no one else was around, she walked past me in the hallway and subtly pressed something into my hand. Small pack of crackers. "Don't let them see," she whispered. Then she walked away. That tiny act of kindness felt enormous. But kindness in that house came with risk. Because that night, as I lay awake listening to the storm fade into uneasy silence, I realized something terrifying. If his sister knew I was sneaking food, then someone else might know too. And if Tim found out, I had no idea what he would do next. By the third day, the storm had weakened, but the atmosphere inside the house had not. If anything, it felt heavier. The sky outside was still dark and swollen with leftover clouds, but the violent winds had softened into steady gusts. For the first time since arriving, I stepped outside briefly, pretending I just needed air. In truth, I needed space. The yard was soaked, branches scattered across the lawn, puddles reflecting a dull gray sky. I wrapped my arms around myself and inhaled deeply. The cool air filled my lungs, clearing the suffocating tension that had settled in my chest. I couldn't stay here. The moment the roads reopened, I would leave. I didn't care how awkward it was. I didn't care what it cost. I just needed to survive long enough to get out. When I stepped back inside, the house felt smaller than before. Tim was in the kitchen, his back turned, talking on his phone. His voice was low, casual, as if nothing extraordinary was happening. As if I wasn't sleeping on his living room floor. As if I wasn't rationing stolen soup in the dark. I glanced down the hallway and noticed his sister's bedroom door slightly open. Earlier that day she had passed me quietly and murmured, "If you need anything, just be careful." It wasn't permission. But it wasn't a warning either. My heart began pounding again, not from fear alone but from calculation. I waited until Tim's laughter drifted toward the back of the kitchen, then moved quietly down the hallway. Each step felt deliberate, measured, dangerous. When I reached her door I paused, listening. Silence. I pushed it open slowly. Her room was neat, soft lighting, pale walls, a faint scent of vanilla lingering in the air. It felt warmer than the rest of the house. Safer. Near the closet, partially hidden behind a laundry basket, I spotted it. A small stash of canned goods and snacks. Probably her personal emergency supply. And next to it, folded neatly, was a thick blanket. Not a thin throw. A real blanket. My throat tightened. For a moment, guilt washed over me. She had helped me. She had slipped me crackers. But survival overrides politeness. I grabbed 2 cans and clutched the blanket to my chest. It was heavier than I expected. Soft, warm, solid. Something about holding it made my eyes sting unexpectedly. I hadn't realized how badly I needed comfort. I moved quickly back down the hallway. When I reached the living room, I crouched beside the couch and carefully slid the cans and blanket underneath, pushing them far enough back that they wouldn't be visible unless someone looked closely. I would retrieve them later, when everyone was asleep. Just as I stood up. "What are you doing?" Tim's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Turn slowly." He stood near the entrance of the living room, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Think." "I dropped my earring," I said quickly, forcing my voice steady. "I thought it rolled under the couch." He stepped closer. For a second I thought he might kneel down and check. But before he could move, his sister appeared from the hallway. "Mom needs you," she said casually. "Something about the generator." Tim hesitated, glancing between us. Then he left. The air rushed back into my lungs. Later that night, when the house fell quiet, I pulled the blanket from under the couch and wrapped it around myself. Warmth. Real warmth. It felt like reclaiming something they had tried to deny me. I opened one of the cans slowly and began eating again. More cautiously this time, more aware of every sound. I didn't hear him approach. I didn't hear the floor creak. I only realized I wasn't alone when his shadow fell across me. Tim stood there, staring at the can in my hand. His expression wasn't shocked. It was angry. "That's ours," he said coldly. "You don't get to take whatever you want." I froze, the blanket still wrapped tightly around my shoulders. "I haven't eaten properly in days," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to control it. "You made your choice," he snapped. "We gave you shelter. You should be grateful." Grateful. For starvation. For humiliation. For sleeping on hardwood while they feasted upstairs. Something inside me shifted in that moment. The fear that had kept me quiet for days began turning into something else. Resolve. Because I realized something critical. He didn't see me as a person anymore. He saw me as a problem. And when someone sees you as a problem, they start thinking about how to remove you. The storm outside was nearly over. But the storm inside that house was just beginning. And I had a feeling that by morning, this wouldn't just be about food anymore. The way he looked at me that night was different. Not confused. Not hurt. Not even embarrassed. Angry. Calculated. Like I had crossed some invisible boundary he believed he had every right to create. "That's ours," Tim repeated, gesturing toward the can in my hand. "You don't get to just take things." I stood up slowly, the blanket still wrapped tightly around my shoulders. For days I had swallowed my pride. I had begged. I had stayed quiet. I had tried to survive without escalating the situation. But something inside me had reached its limit. "You have an entire pantry full of food," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've been sleeping on your floor. I've barely eaten." And you're mad about a can of soup. His jaw tightened. You're not part of this family anymore, he said. We're in the middle of a storm. Supplies matter. I almost laughed at the absurdity. This isn't about supplies, I replied. This is about control. That word landed. Control. For a split second, something flickered across his face. Irritation, maybe even exposure. He stepped closer. You should have left when I ended it, he said quietly. You're only here because we allowed you to stay. Loud. As if I had options. As soon as it's safe, I'm leaving, I said firmly. First flight out. He didn't respond immediately. He just stared at me, studying me in a way that made my skin prickle. Then he shrugged. Maybe you should have thought about that before stealing from us. The conversation ended there, but the tension didn't. That night I didn't sleep. Not because of the floor. Not because of the hunger. Because of him. There was something different in his energy now. Before, it felt like humiliation. Twisted lesson. Power play. Now it felt personal. Like I had challenged him. Around 3 a.m. I heard footsteps upstairs. Low. Measured. Moving across the hallway above me. I held my breath. The footsteps paused. Then continued. I don't know if he was checking on me. I don't know if it was coincidence. But I didn't close my eyes again. By morning, the storm had finally weakened enough for emergency alerts to update. Roads were beginning to clear. Flights were resuming in limited capacity. Relief flooded through me so intensely it almost made me dizzy. I didn't wait. I grabbed my phone and booked the earliest flight I could find. Expensive, inconvenient, but immediate. I packed my suitcase quietly. No announcement. No goodbye. When I rolled it toward the front door, Tim appeared from the kitchen. Leaving? He asked casually. Yes. He leaned against the doorway, blocking part of the exit without fully standing in front of it. You could at least say goodbye to my parents. The audacity stunned me. After what you did? Yes. His expression hardened again. We gave you a place to stay during a hurricane. You stranded me during a hurricane, I replied. Silence stretched between us. For a brief second, I wondered if he would try to stop me. My heart pounded. But then he stepped aside. Suit yourself, he muttered. No apology. No remorse. Just ego. I walked out without looking back. The drive to the airport felt surreal. The sky was still gray, debris lined the streets, and everything looked slightly damaged, like the world itself had been shaken. But nothing felt as damaged as my trust. At the airport, as I sat at the gate waiting to board, my hands wouldn't stop trembling. The adrenaline was finally wearing off. I wasn't just leaving a failed relationship. I was leaving something darker. Something I didn't fully understand yet. When my plane landed back home, I told myself it was over. I blocked his number, deleted his messages, removed every trace of him from my social media. I thought that was the end of the story. I was wrong. Because 3 weeks later, just when I had finally started sleeping through the night again, I looked up from my desk at work and saw Tim walking straight toward me, smiling, like nothing had ever happened. And that's when I realized, escaping his house was only the first part. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for my life to feel almost normal again. 3 weeks of forcing myself back into routine. Back to work. Back to sleep. Back to pretending I hadn't spent 4 days trapped inside a house where love turned into something cruel and calculated. I had blocked him on everything. Phone. Social media. Email. Every digital doorway was sealed shut. Or so I thought. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Bright. Ordinary. I was at my desk, halfway through responding to emails, when the atmosphere shifted. You know that feeling when someone is staring at you. I looked up, and there he was, standing in the middle of my office lobby, smiling. Not nervous, not ashamed, smiling. For a split second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Felt impossible. He lived states away. We hadn't spoken since I walked out of his house. But there he was, wearing the same confident expression he always wore when he thought he had the upper hand. My body reacted before my thoughts did. My hands went cold. My chest tightened. The memory of the hardwood floor, the hunger, the binder, the storm, all of it came rushing back at once. He walked toward my desk casually, like we were meeting for lunch. "Hey," he said, like nothing had happened. "Can we talk?" I stared at him, speechless. "How did you even know where I work?" finally asked. He shrugged. "It's not that hard to find information." That answer unsettled me more than I expected. He leaned slightly against my desk. "I've been thinking," he continued. "I made a mistake. Things got out of hand. My family overreacted. I overreacted. Overreacted. That's what he called it. Starving me. Humiliating me. Trapping me during a hurricane. An overreaction. I think we should start fresh," he said. "Clear the slate. You and me." For a moment, I wondered if he truly believed what he was saying, if his mind had rewritten events to protect his ego, or worse, if he thought I was still the same person who boarded that plane. "I almost passed out from hunger in your house," I said quietly. His smile faltered just slightly. "You're exaggerating," he replied. "You had shelter. You were safe." If the word echoed in my head. Safe doesn't mean fed. Safe doesn't mean respected. Safe doesn't mean treated like a human being. "I want you to leave," I said firmly. Instead of backing off, he sighed dramatically, like I was being unreasonable. "You're still emotional about it," he said. "Time has passed. We can move forward." That was the moment something clicked inside me. He wasn't here to apologize. He was here to see if he still had control. If I would fold again. If I would doubt myself again. One of my coworkers noticed the tension and approached cautiously. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Before I could respond, Tim laughed lightly. "We're fine. Just talking." "No," I said clearly. "We're not." I stood up. "You need to leave. Now." His jaw tightened. For a split second, I saw the same expression from the living room that night, the one he wore when he realized I wasn't playing along anymore. My coworker stepped away and returned with building security. When the guard approached, Tim's confidence cracked for the first time. "Seriously," he muttered. "You're calling security on me?" "Yes," I said. Because this time I wasn't trapped in his house. This time I wasn't isolated. This time I wasn't hungry and exhausted and unsure of myself. Security escorted him toward the exit. He didn't fight, but he kept looking back at me, disbelief written all over his face, as if he truly couldn't understand why I wouldn't give him another chance. When the doors finally closed behind him, my knees felt weak. But I didn't feel scared. Felt clear. That was the last time I ever saw Tim. I changed my number. Tightened my privacy settings. Took extra precautions. But more importantly, I changed something deeper. I stopped romanticizing red flags. I stopped mistaking grand gestures for genuine accountability. And I learned the most important lesson of my life. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Because the second time might cost you more than your dignity. Might cost you your safety. And sometimes, the scariest storms aren't the ones outside your window. They're the ones disguised as love.